No spring practice hurts the Rose Bowl champions as well. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Talking Oregon football, we got James Voss on the line from Autzen Zoo. So please check out him and the rest of the staff right there covering Oregon athletics. We can't try to fool anyone here, James. Not a whole lot to talk about, but we are still hopefully preparing for a college football season. Therefore, when the floodgates open and we are free to roam the streets and anticipate football season in 148 days. Hopefully that clock won't have to be stopped, and we can look forward to football. And we are going to, with an optimistic bent, we are going to plan on football and talk like there will be a 2020 football season.
Absolutely, Mark. I love the attitude. I love the optimism. There's no reason. I mean, there's plenty of reasons not to be optimistic, but the only reason to be optimistic is that we both love college football, and that's what we're going to look forward to. That's our light at the end of this tunnel here, and there's going to be no social distancing when we're back in Autzen Stadium watching those Ducks play.
Yeah, I don't know if that will be used as a possible excuse by certain defensive backs this fall when there's a blown coverage. You know, I was just practicing social distancing. All right. Well, you got a quarterback situation, James, where certainly Tyler Shough has been considered the heir apparent to Justin Herbert. But as you outlined for us, there are other quarterbacks in play. And now there's a very experienced quarterback in play with one Anthony Brown coming in from Boston College. He threw 9 touchdowns with 2 interceptions this past year in a season in which he was plagued by some injuries. But 2 years ago, 20 touchdown passes for the BC Eagles, in leading them to a couple bowl berths. So you throw in the left-hander, and we were expecting to really get a read on this quarterback situation during the spring, and now it is expedited, hopefully, to August. And now we've got a veteran in play that's going to make it more difficult for Tyler and the rest of the quarterback room.
Yeah, absolutely. Just yesterday, sort of from where I was sitting, from where I was watching the whole situation, Anthony Brown sort of came out of nowhere a little bit in the Oregon transfer portal. But certainly he adds depth, he adds experience to that room, whether or not the competition turns out to fall his way. From my perspective, and from talking to a lot of Duck fans just all around, it's Tyler Shough's job to lose, as from his experience within the room with Mario Cristobal and just what we've seen of him in the short time that we've seen him out on the field. But certainly Anthony Brown can come in there and challenge the position, the top spot that Tyler Shough seems to occupy in only the 4 spring practices that we got. But it'll be interesting to see just how much he can turn out. That left-handed might be a little curveball for Oregon football, and that could be a lot of fun to see him in different situations. He definitely still, even when we're talking about Anthony Brown and Tyler Shough, that room, as you mentioned, is still fairly full in a lot of different ways. There's Robbie Ashford, who's the dual threat quarterback who made the late switch from Ole Miss to Oregon, as well as Cale Millen, who was a redshirt freshman last year, and also Jay Butterfield, who's the early enrollee. Unfortunately, early enrollee doesn't seem to pose as much of an advantage as it would have if there weren't this social distancing going on and we didn't see this delay in spring football. But it will be exciting just to see how it all plays out, who ends up in the 3rd spot, who ends up in the 2nd spot, if there was something else to go wrong. Certainly, Oregon has not been without its knock on wood, without its quarterback injuries in the history of college football. And so what has been really overlooked in the recent past is having that reliable 2nd string quarterback, because I think that's probably the most important position in college football.
Again, Anthony Brown is certainly going to have a jump start on the rest of the room when it comes to experience playing in big games against major competition. It's going to be comparable competition that he's used to. His last 2 tight ends are NFL-type players. Other than that, though, he's going to see more talent and speed and play with more talent and speed at Oregon than he did at Boston College. But certainly comparable levels of football. He's not coming from an FCS school, for example, and threw 40 touchdowns at BC against 20 interceptions, and his completion percentage went up markedly each and every season at 59% this past season, because he got the job a few years ago as a freshman and very much showed freshman mistakes and kind of a scattershot arm and a guy that likes to run, but he's become a more polished player the last couple seasons for the BC Eagles. So interesting August camp, hopefully for Oregon at the quarterback position in particular. Got some news just the other day in regards to Josh Simmons that you filled me in on. 16th rated offensive guard out of California, 24th rated player according to the 247 composite out of California, and a top 274 player regardless of position. So certainly when you talk top 300 player in the nation, that is certainly a quality player, but not necessarily not going to Oregon, but he's decommitted at this point and leaving his recruitment wide open.
Yeah, and that news came pretty close to the Anthony Brown news, and so a whole lot of stuff coming in during this short little break here. And Josh Simmons, a 2021 recruit and definitely a 4-star offensive lineman, one of those Mario Cristobal has really been looking to bring in to Oregon in order to beef up that offensive line and the personality of Oregon as a whole. It's certainly disillusioning to see that decommitment from Josh Simmons. He's one of those 4-star recruits that Mario Cristobal has really been going after to beef up that offensive line, and the overall personality of Oregon football is smash mouth and push you around, one that we saw just this past year and ever since Mario Cristobal took the reins. But I personally would tell Oregon fans and anyone watching around the country, especially during this uncertain time where teams are definitely not in their normal recruiting period, not to lose a ton of sleep over a decommitment during this 2021 period. It'll be totally understandable if he wants to go out and continue to open up his recruitment and continue to see his options. That is completely his right. But he certainly might be able to find that Oregon was right all along for him. And that would be something that all Oregon fans should welcome with open arms. And I wouldn't be too concerned right now, as everything is just a little super funky. And it's definitely not something to say, oh, Mario's losing the reins. We've had a lot of coaching turnover, certainly. But it's completely within his right to, especially in this uncertain time, take some time to rethink his options.
And definitely don't be that fan base that when a top recruit decommits, jumps all over him on social media, criticizes him when he's still considering your school. First of all, you shouldn't do it, period, because these young men are making decisions based on what they feel is best for them. And regardless of who they choose, even if it's your arch rival, they're just making their best decision for their own personal life.
Preach.
But at the same time, when there's 7 months left until signing day, many times I've heard about decommitments, and then the fan base jumps on that particular player on social media when he is still entertaining that offer and still has that school into consideration. That only drives him away.
Exactly.
Thinking,
that's one way.
What am I getting myself into?
Yeah, that's one way to really guarantee you're not going to get that recruit. Your school. I know I say we a lot, but
sure.
Going on Twitter and speaking as if you're part of the Oregon administration and the Oregon recruiting staff, saying, oh, you're going to go to USC or whatnot. Like, let them go to USC. It's not a bad school.
There you go. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, discussing the Oregon Ducks coming off top 5 season and a Rose Bowl championship, Pac-12 champions as well, of course. James Voss on the line from Autzen Zoo to help us break down the Ducks for 2020. And considering that we've got a quarterback situation that now includes BC's Anthony Brown, and then a lot of inexperience. Tyler Shuck's the name that people expect to win the job. Obviously, no spring practice or very limited spring practice for some schools. Some schools got in 4 or 5 workouts. Others got nothing in. And then we don't know how long this is going to last. Let's be optimistic and say everybody comes back on August 1st and fall camp is at least normal. there's still obviously, even though everyone's working to the same disadvantage, it's going to affect certain teams and certain units more so than others. Obviously, a new head coach with a new coaching staff that has not been able to work with his team and didn't have a spring practice is really going to be at a disadvantage. So think about those schools with a new head coach and new coaching staff. And then to a lesser degree, those units that have new coaches and they haven't been able to instill those schemes, that terminology, and build those relationships with that positional coach. So just considering the landscape of the Oregon roster, the football team, and what you know about the situation here and who's coming and going, what do you think is the biggest challenge for Oregon football minus spring practice?
Yeah, I think ultimately the biggest question mark, and it would have been a question mark whether or not there was this delay in spring practice, will be the offensive side of the football. We're bringing in Joe Morehead as the new offensive coordinator, and although his system isn't predicted to be crazy different than what Arroyo had previously, or crazily different than Mario Cristobal's overall vision for the football team, it's different nonetheless. And when you're a new offensive coordinator, you're new any sort of coach, this delay is going to affect you heavily, as you pointed out. And so, once again, Joe Morehead being a new offensive coordinator, trying to figure out who his quarterback is going to be, and replacing 4 out of 5 starters on the offensive line, one of the best offensive lines in college football last year, is definitely, without a doubt, the biggest question mark that is going to be going into, hopefully, as you said, hopefully fall camp. Luckily for Joe Morehead, he comes in with not a completely green quarterback room, as we've talked about, as well as the one starter on the offensive line also happens to be the Outland Trophy winner for the best lineman in college football, Penei Sewell. So he definitely, in terms of disadvantages, he is not without his bright spots and his silver linings. So all of those are probably some of the biggest what ifs about what could spring practice have turned out, what could spring practice have showed us. Hopefully our offensive line, all 6 or 7 potential players on the offensive line are eating a lot of steak and potatoes during this social distancing and doing push-ups all day long, just trying to find their way to find a way to step into their role if and when football comes back into play. But it's definitely going to be a challenge for Joe Morehead, and I think everybody's interested to see how everybody's going to respond to this unprecedented time.
You mentioned Penei Sewell, one of the best in the business along the offensive front. Noah, his brother, a lot of people have been speculating about maybe a new role for him that might be fun to watch and might be a little interesting and might be a bit of a gimmick that we've seen, taking that mammoth defensive player, bringing him over across that side of the ball, maybe flipping a pass to him or handing off to him at the 1 yard line just to see him bulldoze into the end zone. And that's been a point of discussion.
It absolutely has. And it excites me too, I'll be honest, as a Duck fan, as a football fan. I love seeing something unique and funky and creative, and I'll certainly be the first to stand up in my seat when I see him in the backfield, if and when I see him in the backfield, looking to see what kind of thing he can do with the football. And he's a high school running back. He's certainly not without experience, but I know Mario Cristobal. I feel like we've really gotten to know him in the last 2 years, and Duck fans should know a little better about Mario Cristobal in these last 2 years, that if there's something creative, maybe it'll show up, maybe it will. But to think that every single situation in the goal line, every single 1 yard situation, we're going to see this bruiser, this refrigerator Perry come out of his linebacker position, where he's going to be an absolute stud, and placed into the backfield every time that there's that opportunity presents itself, is a little misguided. I think I'll definitely be excited when he does it 2 or 3 times in this next year, when we have this next season. But we all know Mario Cristobal. You say the word gimmick. I think that's certainly what it is, especially to Mario Cristobal, when he's got a guy like CJ Verdell, who I've been saying for the last 2 years that he's definitely a guy who's going to be on the Doak Walker list preseason, midseason, and postseason. He's going to be an absolute stud. He's a guy who you've trusted at the goal line throughout his career, and an overtime win against Washington 2 years ago. He's a guy that you can trust behind the offensive line. You can trust his vision. He's proven time and time again when everyone should suggest that someone else should get the ball. He's proven in the Pac-12 title game and in the Rose Bowl, he should be the guy. And so when you have a running back that you really, really trust, a 3-year player like CJ Verdell, a total stud, I think that Noah Sewell is all of a sudden going to be the bruiser on the team is probably a little out there. And I think we know Mario Cristobal a little better than that.
All right. We provide discussion, debate, and analysis on college football each and every day. We want to keep that going and do it better than we've ever done it before. So please like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. James Foss on the line from Autzen Zoo. James, we appreciate you stopping by. We are all hoping for the best for football and even more important things, of course, out there in life. And so it's good to see you doing well. And hopefully we can talk some football more in the next several weeks or months.
Thanks again, Mark. Nobody does it better than you.